Okay, so now we're going to sew our outside waistband onto the main body of the skirt here. And you'll see with the waistband here, I've got the notches, and Libby's been great because she's actually cut a notch in the fusing as well as the outer layer. Usually I'm pretty lazy and I don't cut the notches in the fusing. And if that happens, sometimes it's a bit hard to see where the actual notch is. So if you need to put it, after you've fused it, if you need to put the piece back on the pattern just to check, you can do that. So we've got our centre back here, and you've got a notch for the side seam, notch for the centre front, a notch for the other side seam, and our centre back again. And actually this one does need a little clip to show that. All right. So it'll line up at the centre back here, and I'm just going to pop a pin in there as I work my way around just to hold that together. And you can see now when I put this just flat against it, we need this notch to match up with the side seam. So you are going to get a tiny bit of extra fullness there, which needs to be eased onto the waistband, but without any gathers or tucks or anything.
I think it's probably easier for them if they put a pin in.
Yeah.
Yeah, otherwise if you just try and do it and just sew it on without actually controlling those notch points, you end up with, you run out of waistband, and because you do actually have to ease the skirt onto the waistband a little bit.
Yep, exactly. So this would be, I generally wouldn't need to put these pins in, but it's a great idea.
Yeah, the better you get, the less need you'll have for pinning things.
And you really do have to get used to using the notches and working from one notch to the next notch, rather than just plonking it on. And because otherwise, if you just put it on and then sewed, by the time you got to the end, you'd probably be like at least a centimetre out. So if you put the pins in, that's where you've got to sew to, and you don't really have a choice. Okay, so I've put pins in there. I'll just take this one out while I get sewing. So this is a centimetre seam allowance that I'm got it on here. So line it up with the line on the 4. And what we need to do here, sometimes you can, if you just give both of them a little bit of a pull, sometimes that can even out the easing. And it depends what sort of fabrics you're working with as well. So when you get when you've gone past one notch, then line up the second one. So you pan there, and you can see it's a little bit longer there. So you need to make sure that you pull the waistband down, and that the raw edges of the waist of the skirt and the waistband are lined up together. Otherwise, it'll compromise the width of your waistband. And the thing is, because the top layer is shorter, it's helping you control that fullness underneath. And this is, whenever you've got two things, like if you're sewing in the sleeve or something, it's always easier to sew with the less flexible one, I suppose you'd say, on top.
Whatever fabric is against the feed dog actually helps to ease that in.
Yeah, so you can see here, because of the shadow it's creating, you can see that there's a tiny bit of easing here, but we'll press this waistband anyway, so we'll press that up, that seam allowance up, and that easing will just sort of disappear into the shape of the skirt. So I'm just going to press this seam allowance up now. And that's the way that the seam wants to go as well, because you've got the bulk of the darts and the side seams. It's more likely to want to sit up than down anyway.